In the glass-walled reception area of one of Manhattan's most prestigious skyscrapers, a small line of candidates waited for a discreetly advertised yet highly competitive job interview. The position was unusual, a personal archive assistant with direct access to the executive office of one of America's most private and influential business figures. The screening was meticulous, the requirements subtle. Resumes came from Ivy League universities with polished backgrounds and international experience. It was the type of position meant for someone who fit the mold. The Harrison Tower stood imposingly against the New York skyline, housing the headquarters of Harrison Enterprises, a conglomerate that touched everything from technology to philanthropy. Its founder and CEO, Richard Harrison, was known as much for his business acumen as for his intensely private nature. Few had ever seen the inside of his personal office, located on the top floor with a panoramic view of Central Park. The job opening had created a buzz in elite circles. Working directly with Harrison was considered a career-making opportunity. That's why the presence of a visibly poor girl dressed in simple clothes and worn shoes immediately caught everyone's attention. She couldn't have been more than 13 years old and carried a worn backpack and an envelope. Among the immaculately dressed candidates with portfolios and tablets, she was an anomaly that simply didn't compute in the polished corporate environment. The receptionist Melissa approached her with gentle confusion, presuming she was there by mistake. "Hello, sweetie. Are you looking for someone? Did you get separated from your parent?" But the girl responded with firm politeness. "I'm here for the position." Her voice carried an unexpected confidence that gave Melissa pause. The young woman's professionally maintained smile faltered as she glanced at her appointment list. "I don't see any. There must be some misunderstanding. The interviews today are for the personal archive assistant position with Mr. Harrison's office." The girl nodded. "Yes, that's why I'm here." She held out the envelope. "I don't have an appointment, but I hope Mr. Harrison will see me." Melissa was at a loss. Protocol dictated she should politely but firmly redirect the girl. Yet something in the child's composed demeanor gave her pause. She called over Bradley, one of the supervisors from Human Resources who was overseeing the interview process. Within minutes, other employees began to discreetly observe the unusual situation unfolding in their pristine lobby. The other candidates exchanged glances, some amused, others annoyed at the disruption to the carefully orchestrated process. Bradley approached with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to handling unusual situations without creating scenes. "Hello there. I understand you're interested in the archive position." He crouched slightly to meet her eye level, his tone the kind adults reserve for children they're trying to humor. The girl met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir. My name is Lily." "Lily Morgan." She extended her hand formally, a gesture so adult-like in its execution that Bradley found himself shaking it before he realized what he was doing. "Well, Lily, this position requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree and 5 years of relevant experience," he explained gently. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." Lily didn't falter. "I understand the requirements, but I believe Mr. Harrison will want to meet with me." She patted her backpack. "I have something he's been looking for." Bradley glanced at Melissa, who shrugged imperceptibly. Protocol suggested they should escort the girl out, yet something in her confident demeanor and the mystery of her statement gave them pause. After a brief consultation, they decided to place her in a separate waiting room, away from the main candidates, with no promise that she would be seen. "Wait here, please," Bradley instructed, gesturing to a small conference room off the main reception area. "Someone will be with you shortly." Though his words carried no commitment, Lily thanked him with surprising grace and entered the room without complaint. Meanwhile, high in the tower, Richard Harrison prepared for another round of interviews. At 52, Harrison had built his empire from modest beginnings, transforming a small tech startup into a global corporation. His success was attributed to his uncanny ability to identify valuable opportunities others overlooked. Yet those close to him knew there was a void in his life that no business success could fill. Divorced twice, with no children, Harrison lived a solitary existence despite his wealth. He'd become increasingly reclusive in recent years, focusing almost exclusively on his business ventures and the Harrison Foundation, his philanthropic arm that supported education initiatives worldwide. Skeptical about finding anyone truly suitable, he participated in the interviews merely as a formality. He had already interviewed 6 candidates that day, all impressive on paper, all forgettable in practice. They blended together in a parade of appropriate qualifications and rehearsed answers, each trying too hard to impress while revealing nothing authentic about themselves. When his assistant, Diana Ross, who had endured endless jokes about sharing a name with the famous singer, informed him about the young girl who had appeared without an appointment, his first reaction was to dismiss her. A child. For the archive position? He frowned, checking his watch. The day had already been tedious enough. Tell HR to handle it appropriately. Diana hesitated. She's insisting she has something you've been looking for, sir. Something personal. Harrison waved dismissively. I'm not looking for anything except a competent assistant who won't waste my time. Yet as Diana turned to leave, something stopped him. Perhaps a vague memory of a distant past. Perhaps the discomfort that curiosity provokes when left unsatisfied. Wait, he called. Diana paused at the door. What's her name? Lily Morgan, sir. The name meant nothing to him, yet he found himself saying, Bring her up. Give her 5 minutes, not a second more. Diana nodded and left to relay the instructions. Harrison stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled beneath him. For reasons he couldn't articulate, he felt a strange tension, as if standing on the precipice of something significant. The skyline of New York had witnessed his rise to power, his triumphs and failures. What did this child possibly have to offer that could matter to him now? Minutes later, the door opened. Lily entered with careful steps, her worn sneakers silent against the plush carpet. Despite the opulence surrounding her, she showed no signs of intimidation. She sat without wavering when directed to a chair, her posture straight, her backpack placed carefully beside her. Harrison observed her with ambiguous interest, disbelief mixed with something he couldn't identify. There was something in her features, something familiar yet elusive, that nagged at him. I'm told you have something I've been looking for, he began, not bothering with introductions. You have exactly 5 minutes to explain why you're here, instead of in school where you belong. Lily looked directly at him, her blue eyes startlingly intense. Because I speak the language you understand when you're not pretending to be strong. The office fell silent. Even Diana, standing discreetly by the door, seemed to hold her breath. Harrison felt a chill run through him, though he couldn't explain why those particular words affected him so. Before he could respond, Lily continued, May I read something? Without waiting for permission, she pulled a folded paper from her backpack and began to read, in fluent Italian. It wasn't a mechanical recitation. There was cadence, emotion, clarity. The text was an excerpt from an old handwritten journal that Harrison recognized immediately, his grandmother's diary, written during her escape from fascist Italy before World War II. The diaries had been lost in a fire during his college years. No copies had survived. At least that's what he had believed. Harrison paled visibly. Stop, he said, his voice barely audible. Lily stopped reading, but her gaze remained steady, unflinching. The words hung in the air between them, fragments of a history Harrison thought had been reduced to ashes decades ago. The Italian phrases, his grandmother's distinctive way of describing the hills of her childhood, the specific details about hiding family heirlooms before fleeing, were unmistakable. No one could have fabricated such intimate details. Where did you get this? Harrison asked, his voice unnaturally tight. He leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of his desk. Diana stood frozen by the door, sensing the sudden shift in her employer's demeanor. Lily carefully folded the paper and placed it back in her backpack. It's all here, she said simply. My mom kept everything. She said one day I would understand why it was important. Her voice carried no accusation, no demand, only the matter-of-fact delivery of someone fulfilling a promise. Harrison studied her face more carefully now. Those eyes, a particular shade of blue that seemed to change with the light, the slight tilt of her head when she spoke. A shadow of recognition passed across his face, quickly masked by professional composure. Diana, he said without looking away from Lily, cancel my remaining appointments for today. Hand call Stevens down in legal. Diana nodded and quietly exited, closing the door behind her. Left alone with the girl, Harrison walked to the window, needing distance, needing time to process what was happening. The view that usually calmed him, the ordered grid of Manhattan stretching into the distance, now seemed meaningless compared to the disruption this child had brought into his carefully controlled world. How old are you, Lily? He asked, his back still to her. 13, she replied. 14 next month. Harrison closed his eyes briefly. The timeline aligned perfectly with events he had tried to forget. And your mother's name? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Catherine Morgan, Lily said, but in Italy before she came here, she was Caterina Moretti. The name hit Harrison like a physical blow. Caterina Moretti, the brilliant art history student he had met during his semester abroad in Florence. The passionate, vibrant woman who had shown him an Italy far removed from tourist attractions, who had introduced him to her family's traditions and opened a world of emotional authenticity he had never known in his privileged upbringing. Catherine, the Americanized name she had planned to adopt when following him to New York, plans they had made in whispered promises during their brief but intense relationship. Plans that had dissolved when Harrison, recalled by his father after a family emergency, had returned to America and immersed himself in saving the then struggling family business. He had written to her once, twice, but business consumed him. The letters stopped. The phone calls never happened. Eventually, he convinced himself it had been nothing more than a beautiful memory, a romantic interlude best left in the past. She never told me, he said quietly, almost to himself. She never said she was... He couldn't finish the sentence. Lily filled the silence. She tried to reach you when she found out she was expecting me, she said, her tone neutral, as if reciting facts from a history book rather than the story of her own life. But by then, Harrison Enterprises was becoming successful. Your assistant said you were unavailable. Your father's secretary returned her letters unopened. Harrison turned sharply. My father knew. I don't know, Lily replied honestly. Mom just said she tried everything until she realized you had moved on. That's when she decided to come to America anyway, on her own terms. Harrison returned to his seat, feeling suddenly exhausted. The carefully constructed narrative of his life, the focused businessman who sacrificed personal happiness for success, was unraveling before him. All those years building walls around himself, convincing himself that his inability to maintain relationships was a choice, a necessary sacrifice for his ambition. And all along there had been this child, his child. The diaries, he said, changing the subject abruptly. How did your mother get my grandmother's diaries? Lily reached into her backpack again and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. Its cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. Your Aunt Isabella gave them to her, she explained. After your grandmother passed away, Isabella kept them. When Mom told her about me, Isabella thought she should have them. She said family stories belonged with family, even if that family was unexpected. Harrison took the diary with reverent hands. His grandmother, Rosa, had been the moral center of his childhood, the one who taught him about resilience and integrity when his father focused only on ambition and results. After immigrating to America following the war, Rosa had maintained her Italian traditions, including keeping detailed journals. Her stories of survival during fascism had shaped Harrison's worldview more than he often acknowledged. The diaries had been stored at the family's Connecticut estate, which had caught fire during Harrison's junior year at Yale. He had believed all such personal artifacts had been destroyed. To see one now, preserved through such an unlikely connection, seemed almost surreal. There are 15 volumes, Lily continued. Mom has kept them safe all these years. She taught me Italian so I could read them, understand them. She said it was my heritage too. Harrison flipped through the pages, recognizing his grandmother's elegant script, the way she dotted her I's with tiny circles, the particular flourish of her signature at the end of each entry. The authenticity was undeniable. He looked up at Lily, really seeing her now, not as an intruder or a curiosity, but as a living connection to his own blood. Why come now, he asked, after all these years? Lily's composure wavered slightly for the first time. Mom is sick, she said, her voice smaller now. Stage 4 breast cancer. The treatments aren't working anymore. Harrison felt a pang in his chest. The thought of Caterina, vibrant, laughing Caterina, suffering, struck him deeply. She's at Sloan Kettering, Lily continued. The Harrison Foundation actually funded the research program she's part of. That's how we found out you were here in New York. The irony wasn't lost on Harrison. His philanthropic efforts, largely focused on medical research in recent years, had inadvertently connected him back to the woman he had left behind. Why didn't she come herself? He asked. though he suspected the answer. Lily's chin lifted slightly, a gesture so reminiscent of Katerina that Harrison felt momentarily disoriented. "She didn't want anything from you," she said with quiet dignity. "She never has. Coming here was my decision." She hesitated before adding, "But she didn't stop me. I think she wanted me to know you even if she couldn't bring herself to ask." Harrison stood and walked to a small bar in the corner of his office. He poured himself a glass of water, needing the mundane action to ground himself. His mind raced with implications, with questions, with a strange mixture of regret and possibility he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "You still haven't explained why you came for this particular job," he said finally, regaining some of his usual pragmatism. "You must have known the requirements. There are other ways you could have approached me." Lily's response came without hesitation. "I needed to show you I wasn't asking for charity or recognition. I wanted to earn a place here, on my own merit." She gestured to the diary. "I know your grandmother's stories better than anyone except my mother. I've organized and digitized all the volumes. I can read them in the original Italian and translate them accurately. I'm exactly what your job description asked for, someone who can handle personal archives with discretion and understanding." The audacity of her claim, and the undeniable truth in it, almost made Harrison smile despite the emotional turmoil churning inside him. This child had his grandmother's determination and Katerina's quiet confidence. There was something of himself there, too, in the strategic approach she had chosen. "You're 13, he pointed out, his tone gentler now. "School should be your priority, not work." "I've been homeschooled since Mom got sick," Lily explained. "I've already completed curriculum through 10th grade. The doctors say—" She paused, recalibrating. "I don't have much time left with her. This job would let me stay in New York near the hospital while still doing something meaningful." The practicality of her thinking, the mature consideration of circumstances that would overwhelm most adults, further confirmed what Harrison was beginning to suspect. This was no ordinary child. Diana knocked and re-entered the office. "Mr. Stevens is here from legal, sir," she announced, her curious gaze shifting between Harrison and Lily. Harrison nodded. "Tell him to wait. And Diana, please arrange for a car to take Miss Morgan back to—" He looked at Lily questioningly. "We're staying at the Ronald McDonald House near the hospital," she supplied. Harrison's expression flickered. The contrast between his world of privilege and the reality of Lily's life struck him forcefully. "No," he said firmly. "That won't do. Diana, call the plaza and arrange a 2-bedroom suite, indefinitely. Then contact Dr. Reynolds at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I want a full update on Catherine Morgan's condition and treatment options." Diana's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded without comment. "Yes, sir, right away." She stepped out again, closing the door. Lily watched this exchange with surprise. "We can't afford the plaza," she said plainly, "and Mom wouldn't accept—" Harrison cut her off with a raised hand. "Consider it an advance on your salary." Their eyes met, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. This wasn't charity. It was the beginning of a negotiation. Lily considered this, then nodded once. "I can work after school hours and weekends," she offered, "and I have experience with database management. Mom was a librarian before she got sick." Harrison sat back down, feeling the beginnings of a plan forming. "We'll need to establish legal guardianship arrangements," he said, thinking aloud. "Educational considerations, living arrangements—" He stopped, realizing he was getting ahead of himself. "But first, I need to see your mother." Lily's expression brightened, then clouded with uncertainty. "She doesn't know I came here today," she admitted. "She thinks I'm at the library." The confession, so normal, so teenage, reminded Harrison sharply of just how young she was, despite her remarkable poise. For the first time since she had begun reading from the diary, he saw not just the strategic mind or the connection to his past, but the child herself, brave, vulnerable, navigating an impossible situation with whatever tools she could muster. "Then we should go tell her together," he said, rising from his chair. "Diana can reschedule the remaining interviews. This is more important." As he gathered his coat and briefcase, Harrison felt an unfamiliar sensation, not the calculated determination that usually drove his actions, but something more primal, more essential. For the first time in longer than he could remember, his priorities had shifted completely in the span of a single conversation. The billion-dollar deals pending on his desk, the board meeting scheduled for tomorrow, the acquisition that had consumed his attention for months, all of it suddenly seemed secondary to the quiet girl standing before him, waiting with patience that belied her years. "Ready?" he asked. Lily nodded, carefully replacing the diary in her backpack. As they walked toward the door, Harrison found himself wondering what Katerina would look like now, how the years had changed her. Would there still be a spark of the connection they once shared, or had time and circumstance extinguished it completely? More importantly, how would she react to seeing him after all this time, knowing he had learned the truth she had kept from him for 14 years? The elevator doors closed behind them, beginning their descent from the rarefied heights of Harrison Tower to the messy, complicated reality waiting below. The sleek company car glided through Manhattan traffic, carrying Harrison and Lily toward Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Inside the vehicle, silence hung between them. Not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken questions. Harrison stole glances at the girl beside him, searching for familiar features. The shape of her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. These were unmistakably Katerina's, but the analytical gaze, the strategic thinking, those, he had to admit, resembled his own. Lily sat with her backpack on her lap, fingers tracing the worn straps. "She might be tired," she warned, breaking the silence. "The treatments drain her energy. Sometimes she sleeps most of the day." Harrison nodded, appreciating the preparation. "We won't stay long," he promised. "Just long enough to what?" he wondered. To apologize for 14 years of absence? To explain that he never knew? Words seemed hopelessly inadequate for the situation he was walking into. The hospital loomed ahead, a modern structure of glass and steel. As they entered the main lobby, Harrison was struck by the equalizing nature of such places. Here, his wealth and status meant little against the greater powers of life and illness. Lily led him confidently through corridors and elevators, navigating with the familiarity of someone who had walked these paths many times before. When they reached the oncology floor, a nurse at the station recognized Lily immediately. "Hey there, sweetie. Didn't expect to see you back so soon." Her gaze shifted curiously to Harrison. "Your mom's awake. Dr. Patel just finished his rounds." "Thanks, Nancy," Lily replied with a smile that transformed her serious face. This is Mr. Harrison. He's a friend of my mom's." "From Italy?" The nurse's eyebrows rose slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Room 412, as always," she said, gesturing down the hall. As they approached the room, Harrison felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Anxiety, perhaps even fear. He, who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself hesitating before this simple hospital room door. Lily seemed to sense his reluctance. "I'll go in first," she offered. "Give me a minute to explain." Harrison nodded gratefully, and Lily slipped into the room, closing the door behind her. Left alone in the sterile hallway, Harrison tried to compose himself. Through the closed door, he could hear muffled voices. Lily's animated tone, then a softer, weaker voice that still, even after all these years, sent a jolt of recognition through him. He couldn't make out the words, but the cadence, the musical quality of Katerina's speech remained unchanged. After what seemed an eternity, the door opened again. Lily beckoned him in, her expression unreadable. Harrison stepped into the room and time seemed to collapse. Catherine now, lay propped against pillows on the hospital bed. The vibrant, dark-haired beauty of his memories had been transformed by illness. Her once thick hair was thin, her olive complexion now pale. But her eyes, those extraordinary amber eyes that had captivated him in Florence, remained unchanged, bright with intelligence and emotion. "Richard," she said simply. No accusation, no joy, just acknowledgement. Harrison moved to the bedside, unsure of the protocol for such a reunion. "Caterina," he replied, using her Italian name without thinking. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know about Lily." Catherine's gaze softened slightly. "I believe you," she said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an accent she had never fully abandoned. "Your father made sure of that." Harrison felt a cold wave of understanding wash over him. His father, always protective of the Harrison legacy, always concerned about potential complications to the family business. Of course, he would have intercepted communications from a foreign girlfriend, especially one claiming to be carrying a Harrison heir. He never told me, Harrison said, the pieces falling into place. After I returned from Italy, the company was in crisis. I was working 18-hour days just to keep it afloat. When I didn't hear from you, he trailed off, the inadequacy of his explanation apparent even to himself. Catherine shifted slightly in the bed, wincing with the effort. Sit, both of you, she directed, gesturing to the chairs beside her bed. As they settled, she continued, What's done is done, Richard. I made my peace with it years ago. I built a good life here on my own terms. Her gaze shifted lovingly to Lily. And I have had the greatest blessing a woman could ask for. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. Harrison looked between mother and daughter, seeing the deep bond they shared. Why didn't you try again later, he asked. When the internet made it easier to find people, when my company became more visible. Catherine's smile held a hint of her old mischief. Pride, perhaps, or protection. By then, you were Richard Harrison, the business mogul. Your face was on magazine covers. Your relationships made tabloid headlines. She shrugged slightly. What would have been the point? To disrupt your life? To subject Lily to scrutiny and speculation? We were doing fine on our own. Harrison absorbed this, recognizing both the practicality and the dignity in her decision. Still, a part of him ached for the years lost, the father he never had the chance to be. And now? He asked quietly. Why allow Lily to find me now? The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone in the room. Catherine's expression grew serious. Because now she needs you, she said simply. The unspoken truth that Catherine's time was limited filled the room like a physical presence. Harrison nodded, understanding at last the urgency that had brought Lily to his office. This wasn't about rekindling old relationships or claiming inheritance. This was about a mother ensuring her child would not be alone. The doctors are talking about a new trial, Lily interjected, her voice bright with forced optimism. The Harrison Foundation is actually funding part of it. Isn't that a coincidence? Harrison and Catherine exchanged a look, both recognizing the child's attempt to maintain hope. Yes, Harrison replied, grateful for the change of subject. My foundation has been focused on innovative cancer treatments for the past 5 years. I'd like to speak with your doctors if you'll permit it. There might be other options, experimental treatments not yet widely available. Catherine's expression was knowing. Always the problem solver, she murmured, a hint of their old intimacy coloring her tone. Some things never change. She reached out a thin hand, which Harrison took carefully in his own. The familiar touch, now so altered by illness, created a lump in his throat. Let's be practical, Catherine continued, her gaze direct. I need to know Lily will be taken care of, whatever happens. Legal guardianship, educational provisions, these are the matters that keep me awake at night. Her forthrightness, that quality that had first attracted him in Florence, remained intact despite her physical frailty. Harrison squeezed her hand gently. I've already spoken with my legal team, he assured her. Whatever you decide is best for Lily, I'll support completely. Financial concerns are the least of what I can offer. Catherine nodded, satisfied with his response but not quite finished. Money isn't everything, Richard. She needs stability, guidance, a father who will be present, not just a name on legal documents or a signature on checks. The challenge in her words was clear. Harrison met her gaze steadily. I understand, he said quietly. And I accept that responsibility, fully and without reservation. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Catherine relaxed visibly against her pillows. Good, she said simply. Then we have an understanding. The conversation shifted to practical matters, Catherine's treatment schedule, Lily's educational needs, living arrangements. Harrison listened attentively, making mental notes, already formulating plans. Throughout the discussion, he was struck by the resilience of both mother and daughter, their matter-of-fact approach to circumstances that would have broken many others. When Catherine began to tire, her responses growing slower, her eyelids heavy, Harrison stood to leave. We should let you rest, he said, recognizing the signs of exhaustion. I'll come back tomorrow if that's all right. There's much more to discuss. Catherine nodded, already drifting towards sleep. Lily, why don't you show Richard to the cafeteria, she suggested. Get yourself some decent coffee. Hospital coffee is terrible. The domestic normalcy of the suggestion struck Harrison forcefully. This was how it might have been all along. This easy family dynamic, these shared small complaints and considerations. As they left the room, Lily glanced back at her mother with obvious concern. "She's stronger than she looks," she told Harrison, as if sensing his thoughts. "The doctors are always surprised by her resilience." Harrison nodded, recognizing another trait that had drawn him to Katerina years ago, that core of steel beneath the warm exterior. They found the cafeteria and selected coffee for Harrison and hot chocolate for Lily. Settling at a corner table away from the few other visitors, they faced each other in a moment of awkward recognition. The initial adrenaline of their meeting had faded, leaving them with the reality of their situation. Father and daughter, strangers to each other, connected by both blood and circumstances neither had anticipated. "So," Harrison began, searching for neutral ground, "your mother mentioned you're advanced in your studies. What subjects interest you most?" Lily's face brightened at the question. "Languages mainly. I speak Italian, of course, and I'm learning Spanish and German, and I like computer science. Mom got me into coding when I was 9. She hesitated, then added, "I built a database system for her library before she had to stop working. They're still using it." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and Harrison felt an answering surge of paternal pride that surprised him with its intensity. "Impressive," he said, meaning it. "Harrison Enterprises has a strong internship program in our tech division, perhaps next summer." He trailed off, realizing the presumption in his words. There was no guarantee Catherine would still be here next summer. No guarantee Lily would want to be part of his corporate world. Lily seemed to follow his thoughts. "Mom says it's important to make plans anyway," she said quietly. "To live as if there will always be a next summer, a next year." The wisdom in the statement coming from one so young struck Harrison deeply. This child had been forced to confront mortality in ways he, despite his years and experience, had always avoided. "Your mother is very wise," he said finally. Lily nodded, stirring her hot chocolate thoughtfully. "She never said anything bad about you, you know," she offered unexpectedly. "Even when I asked why I didn't have a dad like other kids. She just said you had different paths to follow, and hers led to me." The simplicity of the explanation, its lack of bitterness or blame, humbled Harrison. Catherine had given their daughter a narrative that preserved dignity on all sides, despite the pain she must have felt at his absence. "She's extraordinary," he said softly. "Always was." Lily studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath surfaces. "Do you regret it?" she asked directly. "Not knowing about me all these years?" Harrison considered the question carefully, recognizing its importance. "Yes," he said finally. "I regret the years lost, the father I didn't get to be. But regrets don't change the present. What matters now is what we do going forward." His corporate persona would have offered platitudes, empty assurances, but something about this girl demanded honesty, even when that honesty was imperfect or uncomfortable. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with his answer. "Mom says the same thing, that looking backward too much keeps you from seeing what's right in front of you." She smiled slightly. "You're more alike than you probably realize." The observation surprised Harrison. He had been focusing on the obvious differences between his life and Catherine's, his wealth versus her modest circumstances, his corporate world versus her academic one. Yet perhaps in the ways that mattered most, they had remained similar souls, despite the divergent paths their lives had taken. As they finished their drinks, Harrison's phone buzzed with messages from his office. The outside world, momentarily forgotten, was reasserting itself. Lily noticed his glance at the screen. "You probably need to get back to work," she said, practical beyond her years. "Mom will be sleeping for hours anyway." Harrison hesitated, torn between the responsibilities waiting at Harrison Tower and the new, more personal obligation he felt toward this unexpected daughter. "I should check in," he admitted, "but I can have my driver take you back to Ronald McDonald House first." Lily shook her head. "I'll stay here. I usually do my schoolwork in Mom's room while she rests. The nurses bring me dinner later." The routine she described, this child essentially living in a hospital room, doing homework while watching her mother sleep, struck Harrison as both heartbreaking and admirable. "I'll arrange for the Plaza Suite tonight," he said, his decision crystallizing. "How you both need somewhere comfortable to stay, somewhere that feels like home." Lily looked skeptical. "Mom won't want charity." "It's not charity," Harrison countered. It's what I owe you both for 14 years of absence, intended or not." Their eyes met and something passed between them. Not quite acceptance, not quite trust, but the beginning of an understanding. "I'll come back this evening," Harrison promised, rising from his seat. "We'll talk more then, make some concrete plans." Lily nodded, gathering her backpack. As they walked back toward Catherine's room, Harrison felt a strange mixture of emotions. Regret for the past, anxiety about the future, but also a new sense of purpose he hadn't expected. This girl, this unexpected daughter, had in the space of a few hours completely reordered his priorities. Whatever came next, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Outside Catherine's room, Lily paused. "She might look strong to you," she said quietly, "but the doctors say the cancer has spread everywhere. They're giving her weeks, maybe a month." The blunt assessment, delivered with such adult understanding, tore at Harrison's heart. "I understand," he said gently. "All the more reason to make these days count." Lily nodded, then surprised him by reaching out and briefly squeezing his hand, the first physical contact she had initiated between them. "Thank you for coming," she said simply, then slipped into her mother's room, closing the door quietly behind her. Left alone in the hospital corridor, Harrison took a deep breath, steadying himself. The empire he had built, the wealth he had accumulated, the power he wielded in boardrooms across the country, none of it had prepared him for this moment, for the responsibility he now faced. As he walked toward the elevator, his phone buzzed again with urgent messages from his office. For the first time in his career, Richard Harrison let them wait. The weeks that followed brought changes to Harrison's life that would have seemed inconceivable just a month earlier. The Plaza Suite became a temporary home for Catherine and Lily, though Catherine had initially protested the extravagance. "It's practical, not sentimental," Harrison had insisted. "You'll be closer to both the hospital and my office." The argument was logical enough that Catherine had reluctantly agreed, recognizing the benefits for Lily if not for herself. Harrison's executive assistant, Diana, found herself rearranging his previously immovable schedule to accommodate daily hospital visits and evening dinners with Lily. Board members raised eyebrows at Harrison's sudden unavailability for late meetings, but none dared question him directly. Rumors circulated throughout Harrison Tower, speculation about the mysterious young girl occasionally spotted in the CEO's private elevator, about the extended block of time now reserved in his calendar simply labeled Family Matters. Harrison found himself navigating unfamiliar territory, not just the practical aspects of becoming a father, but the emotional landscape that came with it. He hired tutors to work with Lily, consulted with child psychologists about the best ways to support her through her mother's illness, and quietly had his legal team prepare guardianship documents that would activate when necessary. He approached fatherhood with the same thoroughness he applied to business acquisitions, researching and planning for contingencies. What he hadn't anticipated was how much he would come to value the simple moments, helping Lily with advanced mathematics homework, listening to her read from Rosa's diaries in perfect Italian, watching her face light up when she mastered a new coding concept. One Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after their first meeting, Harrison cleared his schedule to attend Catherine's treatment session. The oncology department's infusion center was designed to be as comfortable as possible, with recliners instead of hospital beds and large windows overlooking Central Park. Still, there was no disguising its purpose. Catherine sat with IV lines running into a port in her chest, a knit cap covering her now bare scalp. Despite her physical frailty, her spirit remained vibrant as she argued with Harrison about Renaissance painters. Caravaggio understood human complexity better than any of his contemporaries, she insisted, her academic background emerging through her fatigue. His use of light and shadow wasn't just technical brilliance, it was psychological insight. Harrison laughed, enjoying the familiar passion in her voice. "Always the art historian," he teased. "I still remember how you lectured that poor tour guide at the Uffizi when he misdated a Botticelli." Catherine's eyes sparkled with the memory. He deserved it. Calling that a minor work, the man had no appreciation for subtlety. Their shared laughter drew curious glances from nurses and other patients. These moments of reconnection had become precious to both of them, not romantic reconciliation, but the rekindling of a friendship that had once meant everything. While Catherine received treatment, Lily often worked in a small waiting area nearby, giving the adults time to talk. Today, she was deeply absorbed in her laptop, working on a project Harrison had suggested, digitizing excerpts from Rosa's diaries to create a searchable archive. "She's remarkable," Catherine said, following Harrison's gaze to their daughter. "Sometimes I forget she's only 13. She's had to grow up so quickly." The regret in her voice was palpable. Harrison reached over and took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comforting to both of them. "You've given her everything that matters," he assured her. "Strength, compassion, intelligence, those didn't come from me." Catherine squeezed his fingers weakly. "But she needs your stability now, your resources." Her practical approach to her own decline never failed to humble Harrison. "She'll have everything," he promised, "but nothing can replace you, Katerina. You must know that." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I do," she whispered. "But that's the hardest part, knowing I can't protect her from that pain." They sat in silence, the weight of the future hanging between them. Finally, Catherine changed the subject. "Have you told your board yet? About Lily?" Harrison shook his head. "Not officially. My legal team is preparing the necessary documentation. Once that's complete, I'll make a formal announcement." In truth, he had been postponing the inevitable media storm that would follow such a revelation. The discovery of Richard Harrison's secret teenage daughter would create exactly the kind of publicity that both he and Catherine had always avoided. Catherine seemed to read his thoughts. "The press will be relentless," she warned. "For both of you." Harrison nodded grimly. "My PR team is developing a strategy. We'll control the narrative as much as possible, release the information on our terms." The corporate approach felt hollow even as he described it, but it was the only framework he had for handling such situations. Catherine studied him thoughtfully. "Always planning 10 steps ahead," she observed. "Some things never change." But her tone held affection rather than criticism. "It served me well in business," he replied with a small smile. "Less so in personal matters, perhaps." The admission cost him something. Richard Harrison rarely acknowledged failures of any kind. Catherine's expression softened. "We were very young," she said gently, "both following our passions in different directions. Perhaps it wasn't meant to work then." The implication that it might have worked at another time, under different circumstances, hung unspoken between them. Before Harrison could respond, a nurse approached to check Catherine's IV. The moment passed, but Harrison found himself wondering about paths not taken, choices that had seemed clear at the time, but now revealed their complexity. Later that evening, after Catherine had been settled back in the Plaza suite for rest, Harrison invited Lily to join him in his office at Harrison Tower. He had been considering how to integrate her into his life more formally, how to begin preparing her for the public role she would eventually assume as his daughter. The Harrison name carried weight and responsibility. Lily would need to understand both. When she arrived, escorted by his security team, Harrison was struck again by the contrast between her youth and her composure. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her backpack still perpetually by her side, yet she carried herself with a natural dignity that couldn't be taught. "I have something to show you," he said, after she had settled into one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. He pressed a button, and a hidden panel in the wall slid open to reveal a private elevator. "Where does it go?" Lily asked, curiosity brightening her expression. "The archive," Harrison replied, gesturing for her to follow him. They descended 3 floors in silence, the elevator opening directly into a temperature-controlled room that few people in Harrison Enterprises even knew existed. The space was impressive, rows of custom shelving, display cases with museum-quality lighting, a central workstation with state-of-the-art computers and scanning equipment. "This is where we keep the Harrison family history," Harrison explained as they walked through the space. "Documents dating back 5 generations, photographs, correspondence, business records." He stopped before a glass case containing what appeared to be very old letters. "Your great-great-grandfather came to America with nothing but these letters of introduction and a determination to build something lasting." Lily studied the yellowed papers with interest. "Mum says understanding where we come from helps us figure out where we're going," she observed. Harrison nodded, pleased by the connection. "Your mother is very wise." He led her further into the archive, past displays chronicling the growth of Harrison Enterprises, from a small manufacturing operation to the global conglomerate it had become. Finally, they reached an empty section, new shelving installed but not yet filled. "This," Harrison said, indicating the space, "is where your grandmother Rosa's diaries belong, and this," he gestured to a workstation nearby, "is where you'll help catalog them if you're interested." Lily's eyes widened. "You're offering me the job? For real?" The childlike excitement in her voice reminded Harrison forcefully of her youth. For all her maturity, she was still a 13-year-old girl, capable of wonder and enthusiasm. 3 days a week after school, he specified, with appropriate educational oversight and within legal work-hour limitations for your age group. The formal description made Lily smile. "You really have researched everything, haven't you?" Harrison returned her smile somewhat sheepishly. "I like to be thorough." Lily approached the workstation, running her fingers lightly over the equipment. "I could create a digital database," she mused, cross-referenced by date, location, and subject matter, with image recognition for the handwritten pages. Harrison watched her mind work, recognizing the same analytical approach he applied to business problems. "That sounds exactly right," he agreed. "The position comes with a proper employment contract and compensation, of course." Lily turned to him, suddenly serious. "I don't need money," she said. "Mom and I have always managed fine." The pride in her voice matched Catherine's independent spirit perfectly. "It's not about need," Harrison clarified. "It's about recognizing value. Your skills are valuable, your time is valuable. That's the first lesson of business. Never undervalue what you bring to the table." Lily considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she agreed. "But I want the money put into a college fund. Mum's been saving for years, but with the medical bills..." She trailed off, the adult concerns weighting her young shoulders visible in her expression. Harrison felt a familiar pang, watching this child navigate concerns no 13-year-old should have to face. "Already arranged," he assured her. "The Harrison Educational Trust is fully funded for your undergraduate and graduate studies, wherever you choose to attend." The relief that flashed across her face made him wish he could do more, erase all her worries as easily as he had eliminated this one. They spent the next hour discussing the archive project in detail. Harrison was impressed by Lily's questions. Practical, insightful, focused on long-term preservation rather than just immediate organization. She thought like an archivist already, understanding that these records were not just family history, but cultural artifacts with broader significance. As they prepared to leave, Lily paused by a photograph Harrison had not pointed out. A young Richard Harrison in Florence, arm in arm with a beautiful dark-haired woman, both laughing against a backdrop of Renaissance architecture. "Mom has this same picture," she said quietly, "in a box with her special things." Harrison moved beside her, studying the image he had forgotten existed. He and Caterina on the Ponte Vecchio, caught in a moment of perfect happiness by a street photographer. He remembered now how they had bought 2 copies, one for each of them. How young they looked, how unburdened by the future. "We were happy then," he said simply. Lily nodded. "She says those were some of the best months of her life. Even now when she talks about Florence, she still smiles." The insight into Catherine's private thoughts touched Harrison deeply. That she had preserved not just good memories of their time together, but had shared those positive stories with their daughter, spoke to a generosity of spirit he was only beginning to fully appreciate. "Your mother," he said carefully, "is the most remarkable person I've ever known. Her capacity for joy, even in difficult circumstances, that's something I hope you've inherited from her." Lily studied him thoughtfully. "And what did I inherit from you?" The directness of the question caught Harrison off guard. He considered carefully before answering. "Determination, perhaps. A certain stubbornness about getting things right. Not always the easiest traits to live with," he admitted with a rueful smile. Lily smiled back, the resemblance between them suddenly striking. "Mom says I'm stubborn like a Harrison. I guess she was right." The casual acknowledgement of their shared heritage, spoken without drama or fanfare, felt like a milestone in their evolving relationship. As they rode back up to his office, Harrison found himself contemplating the complexities of legacy. He had spent decades building Harrison Enterprises, expanding its reach and influence, always with some vague notion of creating something that would outlast him. Yet he had never considered the most fundamental form of legacy, a child who carried not just his name or his genetic material, but his mannerisms, his ways of thinking, his approach to problems. Watching Lily step confidently from the elevator, Harrison felt a shift in his understanding of what truly mattered. Not the corporate empire that had consumed his life, but this living continuation of himself, improved and enhanced by Catherine's influence. Later that night, after Lily had been dropped at the plaza, and Harrison had returned to his penthouse apartment, he found himself doing something he rarely did, looking through old photographs. In a locked drawer of his desk, he found the small album from his time in Florence. Images of a younger, less guarded Richard Harrison stared back at him, alongside the vibrant Caterina, who had captured his heart so completely. One picture in particular held his attention. Caterina reading in the small apartment they had shared, completely absorbed in her book, unaware of being photographed. The intensity of her concentration, the slight furrow between her brows, he had seen that exact expression on Lily's face today in the archive. The realization struck him with unexpected force. Regardless of legal documents or public acknowledgements, Lily was unquestionably his daughter. In those quiet moments in the archive, she had shifted from an abstract responsibility to a person he genuinely wanted to know, to understand, to protect. His phone rang, interrupting his reverie. Diana's name flashed on the screen. "Sir," she said when he answered, her voice unusually tentative, "I've just received a call from Mount Sinai. Ms. Morgan has been admitted to the emergency room." "Lily is with her." Harrison was already moving, grabbing his coat, heading for the door. "I'm on my way," he said, his heart pounding with sudden fear. "Have my car brought around immediately." As he rode the elevator down to the street level, Harrison found himself doing something he hadn't done in decades, praying that he would not lose Caterina again, just when he had found her. And even more fervently, that Lily would not lose the mother who had been her entire world. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Harrison strode toward the intensive care unit, his footsteps echoing against the sterile tiles. The emergency call had come just after midnight. Catherine had developed a high fever, her weakened immune system unable to fight off an infection that had rapidly escalated to sepsis. By the time Harrison arrived, she had been stabilized but remained in critical condition. He found Lily sitting alone in the waiting area, small and vulnerable beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. When she looked up and saw him, something in her composed facade cracked. For the first time since they had met, she looked exactly what she was, a frightened child facing her worst fear. Without hesitation, Harrison sat beside her and opened his arms. Lily fell into his embrace, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I was reading to her," she whispered against his shoulder. She seemed fine, and then suddenly she couldn't breathe. There was so much commotion, so many doctors. Harrison held her tightly, his own throat constricting with emotion. "Your mother is a fighter," he said, hoping his voice conveyed more confidence than he felt. "She's not going to give up easily." Lily pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "The doctor said the cancer has reached her lungs. That's why the infection hit so hard." The clinical delivery of this devastating news, so adult, so controlled, broke Harrison's heart. This child had been carrying adult burdens for too long. "Listen to me," he said gently, taking her hands in his. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever happens in the days ahead, you are not alone. Do you understand? You will never be alone again." Lily nodded, her eyes searching his for the truth behind the words. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her, because she leaned against him again, allowing herself to be comforted. They sat together through the night, Harrison never leaving her side even as board members texted urgent questions about the Asia market opening, even as Diana called with updates about a pending acquisition. For the first time in his career, Richard Harrison let business wait while something infinitely more important required his full attention. Near dawn, Dr. Patel emerged from the ICU, his expression grave but not without hope. "Ms. Morgan has stabilized," he reported. "We've brought the infection under control, but this episode has significantly weakened her." He glanced at Lily, clearly measuring his words. It would be wise to prepare for difficult decisions in the coming days. Harrison understood the unspoken message. Catherine's time was growing short, measured now in days rather than weeks. "Can we see her?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. Dr. Patel nodded. Briefly, "She's conscious but very tired. Try not to excite or stress her." Inside the ICU, Catherine looked alarmingly fragile. surrounded by machines that monitored every vital function. Yet when she saw Lily, her face transformed with a smile that transcended her physical condition. "There's my brave girl," she whispered, extending a hand that Lily immediately clasped. "I'm sorry for scaring you." Lily shook her head fiercely. "You have nothing to be sorry for," she insisted. Harrison stood slightly back, giving them space for this moment. But Catherine's eyes found him over Lily's shoulder. "Richard," she called softly, "come closer." He moved to the opposite side of the bed, taking her other hand carefully in his own. The tubes and monitoring equipment made the gesture awkward, but Catherine's grateful squeeze told him it mattered. "Some reunion, huh?" she murmured, her attempt at humor undermined by the weakness in her voice. "Not exactly how I pictured us meeting again after all these years." Harrison shook his head, unable to match her lightness. "Caterina," he said, using her Italian name deliberately, "I need you to fight. Lily needs you to fight." Catherine's expression softened. "I've been fighting for months, Richard. Sometimes the most courageous thing isn't to keep struggling, but to accept when it's time to let go." The frank acknowledgement of what they all faced hung in the air between them. Lily's grip on her mother's hand tightened, but she didn't protest. She had clearly heard this difficult truth before. "I'm not ready," Harrison admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "We've just found each other again. There's so much I want to tell you, so much I want to ask." Catherine's smile held both tenderness and resignation. "Life rarely gives us perfect timing," she said softly, "but it did give us Lily. And now, it's giving her you." The simplicity of her framing, the gift exchange of parenthood, moved Harrison deeply. This woman who had every right to bitterness, to anger at his 14-year absence, instead saw only the positive connection being forged between father and daughter. "Rest now," he urged, seeing the fatigue in her eyes. "We'll be right here when you wake up." Catherine nodded, her eyelids already drooping. "My two stubborn Harrisons," she murmured, as she drifted towards sleep. "Take care of each other." Over the next 3 days, Catherine rallied and faded in cycles that left everyone emotionally exhausted. Harrison arranged for the best specialists, consulted with researchers developing experimental treatments, called in favors from medical contacts around the world. But each consultation ended with the same gentle reality: Catherine's cancer had progressed too far. The most they could offer now was comfort and dignity. Harrison moved into the Plaza suite with Lily, unwilling to leave her alone during this crisis. They established a routine: mornings at the hospital with Catherine, afternoons when she rested where Lily would work on the archive project to maintain some normalcy, evenings together in the suite where Harrison would cook simple meals he remembered from his bachelor days. In these quiet domestic moments, they began to build something neither had expected: a father-daughter relationship that stood on its own merits, not just on obligation or crisis. On the 4th night after Catherine's emergency, as Harrison prepared pasta in the suite's kitchen, Lily sat at the counter working on her laptop. Without looking up, she asked, "Why did you never marry again? After your divorces, I mean." The directness of the question, coming without preamble, was pure Lily. Harrison considered as he stirred the sauce. "I told myself it was because I was too focused on building the company," he answered honestly. "That relationships were a distraction I couldn't afford." He tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning. "But looking back, I think maybe I was just avoiding the risk of caring that much again." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Because of Mom?" Harrison turned to face her, surprised by her perception. "Partly," he admitted. "Though I didn't fully understand that until recently. Your mother and I had something rare. When it ended, I think I convinced myself that kind of connection wasn't compatible with the life I'd chosen." Lily closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. "Did you love her? Back then in Italy?" The question deserved his complete honesty. "Yes," Harrison said simply, "more than I allowed myself to acknowledge at the time. More than I've loved anyone since." Lily absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. "She loved you too," she said finally. She never said it directly, but I could tell from the way she kept that photograph, the way her voice changed when she talked about Florence. The revelation that Catherine had preserved positive memories of their relationship, despite its painful ending, touched Harrison deeply. "Your mother has an extraordinary capacity for forgiveness," he observed. Lily smiled slightly. "She says holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick." The familiar saying, so characteristic of Catherine's practical wisdom, made Harrison laugh. That sounds exactly like her. Their conversation was interrupted by Harrison's phone. Seeing the hospital's number, he answered immediately, his heart racing. But the news was positive. Catherine was awake, lucid, and asking for them both. Despite the late hour, they rushed to the hospital. When they arrived, Harrison was struck by a change in Catherine. Though physically no stronger, there was a clarity in her eyes, a sense of purpose that had been missing in recent days. "Sit," she directed as soon as they entered. "Both of you. There's something important we need to discuss." Harrison and Lily exchanged concerned glances, but complied, taking seats on either side of her bed. Catherine reached for both their hands, creating a physical connection between the three of them. "I've been thinking about what happens next," she began, her voice weak but determined. "About what Lily needs, what you both need." She looked first at her daughter. "Tesoro mio, you know how much I love you, how proud I am of the person you're becoming." Lily nodded, tears already forming in her eyes, despite her obvious attempt to stay strong for her mother. Catherine turned to Harrison. "Richard, these past weeks have shown me what kind of father you can be. Attentive, supportive, willing to learn and grow." She squeezed both their hands. "I need you to become a real family. Not just two people connected by obligation or crisis or even DNA." Harrison felt the weight of her words, understanding this was not a request, but a final charge. The most important thing Catherine would ever ask of him. "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "With everything I am, I promise." Catherine nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now there's something else." She looked at Lily. "Bring my bag, please, the small one." When Lily returned with the bag, Catherine withdrew a worn leather journal, one Harrison hadn't seen before. "This is my diary," she explained. "I started it the day I learned I was pregnant with you, Lily. It's all there, my hopes, my fears, my memories." She handed it to Harrison. "I want you both to read it together. Not all at once, but over time. It's the story of our family, the parts I've experienced at least." The gift rendered Harrison speechless. That Catherine would entrust him with her most private thoughts, her unfiltered emotions about their shared past and her journey as a single mother, demonstrated a level of forgiveness and trust he hadn't dared hope for. "Katerina," he began, but she shook her head. "Just promise you'll read it with her, that you'll help her understand where she comes from. All of it, not just the Harrison side." Harrison nodded, carefully placing the journal in his jacket pocket. "I promise," he said again, the words taking on the weight of a sacred vow. Catherine smiled, visibly tiring from the emotional exchange. "Good," she whispered. "Now I think I need to rest." As she drifted towards sleep, she murmured something in Italian, a phrase Harrison recognized from their time in Florence. "La famiglia è dove inizia la vita, e l'amore non finisce mai." Family is where life begins and love never ends. 5 days later, Catherine slipped away peacefully, with Harrison and Lily holding her hands. In her final moments, she had been lucid and calm, offering reassurances rather than seeking them. Her concern focused entirely on the two people she was leaving behind. The depth of her selflessness, her grace in the face of separation, left an indelible mark on Harrison. He had encountered many forms of courage in his business career, but never anything that matched Catherine Morgan's quiet dignity in her final days. The weeks that followed tested both Harrison and Lily in ways neither had anticipated. Grief came in waves, sometimes predictable, often not. Harrison found himself navigating not only his own complex emotions about Catherine's passing, but also the unfamiliar territory of supporting a grieving teenager. There were difficult days when Lily withdrew completely, locking herself in her room at the new apartment Harrison had purchased near his own. There were nights when she called him in tears, unable to sleep, needing to talk about her mother until dawn broke. Through it all, Harrison remained steadfast, adjusting board meetings and business trips around Lily's needs, making himself available without question or hesitation. The media eventually discovered the story, of course. Harrison's PR team managed as best they could, but the narrative was too compelling to contain. The billionaire CEO discovering his teenage daughter after 14 years, the tragic circumstances of their reunion. Harrison weathered the publicity storm with uncharacteristic patience, his priorities fundamentally altered by recent events. 3 months after Catherine's passing, on a cool autumn evening, Harrison and Lily sat in the private library of his penthouse. Between them on the coffee table lay Catherine's diary, opened to the first entry. They had established this ritual. Every Friday evening they would read a few pages together, learning about Catherine's journey and, by extension, their own. Tonight's entry described Catherine's initial shock at discovering her pregnancy, her fear and uncertainty, but also her immediate and absolute love for the child growing within her. "I've never been so terrified or so certain of anything," she had written. "Whatever comes next, this child will be loved beyond measure." Lily's voice broke as she read the words aloud. Harrison reached across the space between them, placing his hand over hers. "She kept that promise," he said softly. "Every day of your life." Lily nodded, wiping away tears. "I miss her so much," she whispered. "Sometimes I wake up, and for a second, I forget she's gone, then it hits me all over again." Harrison understood the feeling perfectly. Despite the brevity of their reunion, Catherine's absence left a void in his life that seemed impossible to fill. "I miss her too," he admitted. "Her courage, her wisdom, the way she could see through all my corporate defenses with just a look." This drew a small smile from Lily. "She could always tell when I was hiding something," she agreed. It was like she had a built-in lie detector. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, united in their memories of the remarkable woman who had connected them. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Harrison said finally. "Your mother mentioned once that you sing, that she taught you some of the Italian lullabies her grandmother sang to her." Lily looked surprised. "She told you about that?" "She said it was something special you shared," Harrison explained. "I wondered if sometime when you feel ready you might sing one for me." The request clearly caught Lily off guard. She hesitated, vulnerability flashing across her face. Then, without preamble, she began to sing softly, a gentle melody in Italian that Harrison recognized immediately. It was the same lullaby his grandmother Rosa had sung to him as a child, the same song that had been passed down through generations of their family. As Lily's clear voice filled the room, Harrison closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the continuity of heritage, the unbroken thread that connected them across time and distance. When she finished, the silence felt sacred. "That was Rosa's favorite," Harrison said quietly. "My grandmother sang it to me every night until I was old enough to protest that I was too grown up for lullabies." The revelation seemed to touch Lily deeply. "Mom never told me it came from your side of the family," she said, wonder in her voice. "She just said it was a very old song that traveled a long way to find us." Harrison smiled at the poetic framing, so characteristic of Catherine. "Like us," he observed. "We traveled a long way to find each other too." Lily nodded, a new understanding passing between them. They were no longer strangers connected by circumstance and obligation, but family discovering their shared roots, their common future. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Harrison stood at the window of his penthouse, looking out over the city lights. In his hand he held the photograph from Florence, he and Caterina on the Ponte Vecchio, young and in love, unaware of the diverging paths that lay ahead. Yet those paths had ultimately converged again, bringing him the greatest gift he had never thought to wish for, a daughter who carried the best of both her parents. As he placed the photograph in a frame on his desk, Harrison felt something he had not experienced in decades, a sense of completeness, of purpose beyond business success or financial achievement. Catherine had given him not just a daughter, but a second chance at the kind of connection he had sacrificed for his ambition. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by the trappings of corporate success that had once defined him, Richard Harrison made a silent promise to both Catherine and Lily that this gift would not be wasted, that the family they had formed against all odds would become his most important legacy. 6 months later, the archive at Harrison Tower was officially reopened with a private ceremony. The expanded space now included not only the business and family records of past generations, but also a special section dedicated to Catherine Morgan's contributions to art history and her work preserving Italian cultural heritage. At the center of this exhibit stood a glass case containing Rosa's diaries, professionally preserved and digitized, alongside Catherine's own journal, which she had left to both Harrison and Lily. The plaque beneath the display read simply, "Heritage preserved is identity sustained, in memory of Catherine Morgan." guardian of stories that connect past to future. At the ceremony, Lily stood beside her father, no longer the uncertain child who had appeared in his office less than a year earlier. Now officially, Lily Morgan Harrison. She had grown into her dual heritage with remarkable grace, balancing school achievements with her ongoing work in the archive. As guests circulated through the exhibition, Harrison overheard a board member asking Lily about her future plans. "Harvard has an excellent business program," the man suggested, clearly assuming she would follow the expected Harrison path. Lily smiled politely. "I'm actually considering NYU's program in art conservation," she replied, "combining technology with cultural preservation. Mom always said understanding where we come from helps us know where we're going." The board member looked slightly taken aback, glancing at Harrison as if expecting him to correct this deviation from the presumed trajectory. Instead, Harrison placed a supportive hand on Lily's shoulder. "The Harrison Foundation will be establishing a new division focused on cultural heritage preservation," he announced. Lily's insights have been invaluable in shaping that initiative. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Later, as the event concluded and the last guests departed, Harrison found Lily in the archive, standing before a newly installed photograph, Catherine in Florence, laughing into the camera, the Italian sunlight casting her in golden light. "She would have loved this," Lily said as Harrison joined her, "seeing her work recognized, knowing her stories will be preserved." Harrison nodded. "She built a bridge between worlds," he observed. "Between past and future, between her heritage and mine, between us." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about taking some time away from the company. Maybe a trip to Florence this summer, to show you where it all began." Lily's face brightened with genuine excitement. "Really? You'd take that much time off?" The surprise in her voice reminded Harrison of how completely his priorities had shifted. Once, the thought of stepping away from Harrison Enterprises for even a week would have been unthinkable. Now, nothing seemed more important than sharing this journey with his daughter. "Some things are more important than quarterly reports," he said simply. As they walked together through the archive, surrounded by the physical manifestations of their shared heritage, Harrison felt a deep sense of rightness. The path that had brought them here had been winding and at times painful, but standing beside his daughter, he couldn't imagine any other destination. In the quiet of the archive, with Catherine's spirit seeming to hover protectively over them both, Richard Harrison finally understood what true legacy meant. Not buildings or balance sheets, but the connections that endure beyond time and circumstance. The love that continues even when those we cherish are gone. That evening, as they left Harrison Tower together, Lily hummed the old Italian lullaby softly to herself. Without thinking, Harrison joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with hers. They both paused, surprised by the spontaneous connection. Then, smiling at each other with perfect understanding, they continued the melody together as they walked toward home.